My biggest memory from the whole experience and having meningococcal disease was actually waking up from a 10-day medically induced coma, and I woke up without legs, and that was an incredibly life-changing moment for me. My father spent a week or so trying to work out the best way to tell his son that he didn't have any feet.
Improvements in nutrition, sanitation and vaccination have literally saved hundreds of millions of lives over the past century. Immunisation is second only to clean water as a lifesaver. We immunise for two major reasons. Firstly, to directly protect children and adults against deadly diseases. And secondly, to prevent the transmission of infectious diseases so that the vulnerable, even the unvaccinated, can be protected, can be shielded by a circle of friends, by a chain of protection. But there's one weak link in the chain of protection, and that's adult immunisation.
For example, fewer than 1 in 2 at-risk adults with chronic medical conditions are vaccinated against influenza and pneumococcus, and only about 10% of adults in developed countries have had a booster against whooping cough.
So you may not think it's important, but you can infect someone else and they can infect someone else. And then that person who thinks they just have a cold might come into contact with a baby, and that's why it's so important.
Almost everyone has their children immunised these days. We get reminders through the mail and incentives from the government to get our children vaccinated. But we are both ignorant and much less organised about adult immunisation.
I really had no idea where this disease came from. I had not been in contact with anyone who was sick, so it was a real shock to us. Everyone was quite concerned about the fact that this had just happened so abruptly, and really no one had any idea where it came from or any more than that.
Most people, when they think about serious infectious diseases, worry about the threat of death. But indeed, most people recover, and the main problem is long-term disability. And this is an issue that we have to pay much more attention to.
Post-polio, also known as the late effects of polio, affects people who had polio about 30 to 40 years after the initial infection. And post-polio relates to getting new muscle weakness and muscle pain, joint pain, and fatigue, which I find the most debilitating symptom.
I think for me one of the hardest things was actually in rehabilitation and then first learning to use prosthetic legs.
My parents were told that I would never walk, but my mother refused to believe that, and she organised a physiotherapist to work with me, and I put in lots of hours with him and learnt to walk with 2 full-length calipers.
I remember the first time that I ever stood up on prosthetic legs was excruciatingly painful, and at that point I wasn't really sure whether it would always be painful or I would be a point where I would be able to walk completely without pain.
Once I got over the initial rehabilitation and I just got on with life, went to school and university and whatever, in my 30s I suddenly realised that I was getting new problems, new weakness, and I found out that that was the late effects of polio. So it was quite a shock, and it's a shock for everybody who's had polio because they think they've put it behind them and they haven't.
Of children who develop paralytic polio, about 3% will die. Polio, however, can occur in adults, and it's much more severe. If an adult gets polio, the chance of developing paralysis is more like 1 in 75, and the chance of dying is 30 to 50%. Therefore, for adults to be protected against polio is even more important than it is for children. The latest country to announce the elimination of polio is India. With a population of over 1 billion, that's an amazing achievement. We are now just so close to the worldwide elimination, which can mean eradication of polio.
While we're winning the battle with polio, young people like Marty continue to contract meningococcal disease, particularly meningococcal B, for which vaccines have only recently been developed.
Now, Marty Maybury, skiing for that much sought-after medal.
After contracting meningococcal disease and after I'd been rehabilitated and was back on my feet again, I actually got back into a sport which I'd always loved, which was alpine skiing, and subsequently became involved in ski racing, and I was lucky enough to have competed in the last 2 Winter Paralympic Games and actually won a silver medal in the downhill in Vancouver, which was an incredible experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, the silver medalist representing Australia, Marty Mayberry.
My mum was pregnant, 6 weeks pregnant, and there was a fire in the countryside of Comoda, which is where we all grew up, and she went to make sandwiches for the firemen, as they do, and there was a person there with German measles, and Mum knew she was pregnant, and she went to the doctor saying, I've been in contact with German measles, and but it was too late. She came out in spots pretty well that day.
Rubella is commonly known as German measles. It's a viral infection, an RNA virus in fact, that we can prevent by vaccination. In children and adults it's relatively mild, but it's the unborn child, congenital rubella, in whom the infection can be just so severe.
Antoinette was affected with, she was born with huge plaques of cataract over both her eyes. She was born with a heart defect, and she was born with hearing disability. So it was a beginning of a different journey. Antoinette, my sister, is divine. She's very special. She teaches us all tenacity and endurance and courage. I remember the day she had the nerves cut to her eyes at the Ione Hospital, and she cried. When she does cry, she cries from way down deep and biggest tears, and it's rare that she cries. But she really cried that day and said, I've lost my sight. And as grey as her world always was, we think, she was the sharpest pool shooter. She beat everyone at backgammon. She'd get a Rubik's Cube out in a minute. She's just like quite a switched on little thing.
Which was your favourite game?
Ooh, billiards.
Did you win a lot at billiards?
Yeah, I used to win a lot.
She's like a tonic. Antoinette is a tonic. It's like you have a bad day, visit Antoinette. Then it's just like, oh my God, nothing's that hard. Nothing's hard. She just does it. It's just amazing. So no, she's an inspiration.
Women planning to have a pregnancy need to prepare in many ways, including having a good diet and checking that they are immune to infectious diseases, especially rubella.
You just don't know if you've had rubella in the past. It's not a typical childhood illness that you can remember or that your mother can remember. So it's important that you get immunised and that you be immunised before you get pregnant. There are some immunisations that are safe to give in pregnancy. These include tetanus and influenza vaccination. Indeed, it's a wise thing to give influenza vaccination because the severe complications of flu especially happen towards the end of pregnancy when women can end up in intensive care and babies can be lost.
And a recent recommendation in the United States to vaccinate pregnant women against whooping cough means that newborns can be much better protected.
When we first met the McCaffrey family, Tony and Dave, on Chain of Protection 2 years ago, we realised the horror of pertussis and how it can severely affect and even kill small children. By improving the vaccine uptake against pertussis in adults, we can help stop the spread of this deadly disease, especially to young, vulnerable infants.
Cocooning is all about protecting the baby until they have the immunity to protect themselves. In those first few months, babies are so vulnerable to whooping cough, and the only way we can protect them is if we all work together. So that's children, teenagers, adults, grandparents, childcare workers and healthcare workers. If everyone has an up-to-date booster, then we're all doing our bit to help protect that baby.
Evie contracted whooping cough in her first days of life while still in the hospital where she was born. I was in a 4-bed ward, and there was a dad to one of the babies who was in the first stages of whooping cough, and he had it and spread it around in the room. I was heartbroken that I brought her into the world and she contracted whooping cough. So I will forever do as much as I can to help, you know, and raise awareness, because not enough people know about it.
I know as a new parent that it can be really confrontational to ask people to have a booster. You really don't want to offend people. But I think if you can point them to a website such as Chain of Protection, so that they can understand just how dangerous whooping cough is for a baby, that they have no immunity until they can get at least 2 shots, that if everyone around them gets a booster, it will protect them. It's one of the best presents that they can give.
The 2 most effective ways of preventing infectious diseases are clean water and immunisation. There are 3 things you really must do.
Learn about immunisation, act on what you've learnt, and care for yourself and those around you. Get the facts and get the truth about immunisation. Immunisation is a lifelong responsibility, and the immunisation schedule protects you as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, and also in retirement. Get the complete immunisation schedule at chainofprotection.org. Take action. Go and visit your GP. Just because you've been vaccinated as a child doesn't mean you are covered as an adult. There are life-saving vaccinations that adults need to have. Chances are, if you don't know what vaccinations you've had, you may well be at risk of a life-threatening infection.
Build your chain of protection. Get yourself immunised. Get your family immunised. Tell your friends and visit chainofprotection.org.
I immunise because I care. I immunise because I care.